We are back for another episode. Really excited about this one. There you are.
What is up, Tony? Sorry, I'm adjusting my camera here.
That's okay. I'm adjusting mine. Hopefully the chickens shut up too out there and you can't hear them.
Sorry.
Yeah,
just
how are you?
Top of my head there. I'm good. How are you, man?
I'm tired. I stayed up way too late just doing work, and I woke up way too early for no apparent reason.
That's all right, man.
I tried to go back to bed. It didn't work. You know, whatever. It's life. It's old people life.
Yeah, that's the way it is, man.
Even though we are 29 forever.
I've been 29 for too many years now. That's the problem.
Welcome to Submerge Life. This is a show where we are talking to people on how they are submerging into life and listening to their journey. Today, I have a very special guest. Of course, everybody is a special guest, but don't tell him that. His name is Mr. David Lopez. I call him Pez. So welcome, Pez. How are you, buddy?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm good, man. Just staying busy with life, and you know how that goes.
Yeah, especially now that everything is opening up. Now it's like, okay, now I can go do things, which is great because I don't like it when somebody tells me to stay home. I want to make that decision myself. So I'm staying home and I've made the decision, not a government. Right. So, you know, it's like this catch-22. When they were telling me I have to stay home, I didn't want to stay home. But now that I have the choice, I'll stay home all day.
That's why I'm always praying for you, Tony.
Thank you. I need it. Anyhow, so thanks for coming on the show. We are going to talk about a couple of things. I wanted to talk about a couple of things that you've gone in your life. You know, I've known you for a very long time. I mean, we're only 29, so this hasn't been that right? I want to talk about how you're submerging into life. That's number one. Okay. And then I also want to get into your father passed away last year and how you've been dealing with that, and then some things that you've learned from him. And then I also want to talk about your health issues. You've been battling something, and so if I'm correct, you go to the hospital like once every 3 to 5 months. Is approximately how often you're going? Yeah, I think it's around there.
I mean, it's too often.
Yeah, it is. It is. So I do want to touch on those things. That's not a good, when they ask for the autograph, you're like, no.
Right.
You're back. Anyhow, so those are the three topics I want to go over, because you've got a great story, a great journey on everything. So let's start with, how are you submerging into life and getting back into the world today?
You know, that's kind of a hard question to answer, because it's so different now, right? I think we hear the phrase a new normal. Is this new normal permanent, or is it temporary type of thing? But how am I getting back into the world today? I think it's trying to take advantage of all the relationships that I have, you know?
Yeah.
We'll hit this down the line, but I'm not very good at relationships. You know, I'm not the outgoing one, is really what I'm trying to say. So trying to take advantage of what those relationships have to offer.
I can second that, because I think we only have like 2 selfies together. Like, we've known each other for like 10 years and we only have 2 selfies.
Probably over 10 years, but yeah.
Yeah, that's that's not my bad. That's your bad.
That is my bad. I'll take the blame for that one. A lot of, I don't want people to misunderstand what I mean by submerged life and thinking that you've got to go jump out planes and go on year-long mission trips. I don't, you know, that's not what I'm trying to, I mean, yes, those are great things, but also just in submerging into everyday life and not staying home on a phone or streaming, and just staying, you know, on a digital platform, but actually going out there and living it with your family, with your friends and your loved ones. So anyhow, Yeah, I know it's probably going to take a little while to get back into the things, and then for you, it's just to go and be personal with people and take more selfies with them.
Right. I'll try. We'll get another selfie here soon.
Great. Well, let's jump into the health issues, or the health issue that you have to deal with. When did this all start? First, when did it start, and then what is it?
Yeah, no problem. So this actually all started back in 2007. So I was 23 years old, if I'm doing my math right. I was 23 years old. So I've had this health condition where I was born with a deformity in my pancreas. So I am now prone to pancreatitis, which is just inflammation of the pancreas.
Okay.
It first started February. I actually have the exact date because after several years of dealing with this, and I realized this was going to be like an ongoing issue for me, it became something of like a catalyst in my life of something I'm going to have to deal with my whole life, and it just kind of changed my perspective in a lot of ways, and we'll get into that. But I had wristbands made. Let me see if we can see this guy here. There we go. I'm not sure if it's backwards or not, but it just says endure. And then it has the date I first got sick, which is February 19th of 2007. Yeah. And then one of the Bible verses, again, which we'll get into that I kind of live by, which is James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4.
Okay.
So that was the first time I got sick. It happened really kind of out of surprise. It was a holiday, actually. It was a 3-day weekend, which was President's Day. I spent that Monday playing with the guys. We went to play basketball, football in the morning, basketball in the afternoon. And then by the time I got home in the evening, I just started feeling sick, real bad stomach aches, that sort of thing. After a while, it led to vomiting. After a while of vomiting, I knew something was wrong. And I went to the hospital. And that's when they told me I had pancreatitis, which I didn't know what it was, or it wasn't diagnosed as to the cause yet, but that's what I had. And I was in a ton of pain. I was back at work the next day, oddly enough, because at that point I was just kind of toughing it out, thinking I was good. But that's the first incident. That's when it all started. And as we go along telling my story here, it gets more intense.
So did you, like, it happened, you went to the hospital, you went back to work. So it was kind of like, okay, whatever, it's a one-time deal. It may happen again, but you kind of went back to normal? Like in your life and in your thought process, did you just jump right back into doing the things?
Yeah, first time, kind of no big deal. Like mentally, I was good. I actually thought I had food poisoning because I had never had food poisoning before. So I thought, maybe because I'm, throwing up so much, maybe that's what I've got going on here. I went back to work the next day. Don't get me wrong, I was in pain, but they gave me some pain meds and I was able to deal and function and that sort of thing. And I thought I was good. I eventually went back to normal in a matter of, probably about a week. I just felt normal again. I lived my everyday life. It was really the second time that it happened that this really kind of took me out.
What happened at that point?
The second time it happened, I same thing. Abdominal pain, vomiting, went to the hospital. They said, again, pancreatitis. And that's when in my mind, I was like, okay, same thing twice. What is this pancreatitis? What does that even mean? And so went to the hospital. I was actually there for much longer this time. And when I had gone to the hospital the second time, I was in so much pain that I literally thought to myself, am I dying? As this was before I get to the hospital, before I kind of called the ambulance and that sort of stuff, I thought, am I dying? And that lasted for a short time. I don't want to, oversell that, make it seem like this whole process felt like that.
At least this time.
Exactly. But it was very intense is my point. I had never felt the pain like that. I was out of work I was in the hospital for a couple weeks, out of work for a couple months. And doctors didn't know what was causing this. It wasn't until several years down the road, I eventually got a referral to UCSF. They did some exploratory, not surgery, but procedure. and they were able to, stick some cameras down my throat, go through my digestive system. And then that's when they diagnosed me with something called pancreatic divism. I won't bore you with the whole medical side of that, but basically it's a deformity in my pancreas. That makes me prone to that.
So it's not just your face that looks weird. It's also your face. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
We go back 12 years, 10, 12 years. This is what we do. So enjoy the laughs, everyone.
I wouldn't expect anything less from you, Tony.
How long between that first episode? Okay, back to serious. How long between the first time it happening and the second time it happening? What was the time span between those two?
I don't know the exact time frame, but I know it was between, maybe 3 to 5 months, something like that.
Okay.
So months is what we're measuring in here. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got everything checked out. They told you what it was. And then what happened after that?
Yeah. So at that point, that's when they told me things kind of needed to change, because my pancreas has this deformity. I'm prone to pancreatitis. So basically, if I eat terrible fried foods, drinking sodas all the time, things like that, things that make your digestive system work really hard, it's going to make things harder for your pancreas. So that's when I really started the journey of changing how I eat. And I'm much better now in terms of my eating habits. I'm still not great. It's a long process to break bad habits, but I'm much better than where I was before. So that was kind of the first change. Okay, change your eating habits. I mean, I used to eat out probably 4 times a week, and I'm not talking about sit down dinner, nice meal where you can order something with veggies. I'm talking fried foods, French fries, burgers, sodas, things like that. So that changed that. Eventually they went to do some procedures that have helped it.
Yeah.
So placing a stent, a little tube essentially in the pancreas, duct or valve, that has helped. They call it ballooning. They put a balloon in there and inflate the balloon to stretch that duct over time as well. They even cut the valve a little bit to try and cut it open. The whole problem is the valve is very narrow. It's very small. So they're trying to widen it some. So it's been this whole process. Probably after maybe 4 years of having this was when I actually got help with these procedures. But that in itself has been quite a journey. I mean, being at UCSF, it's a pretty big hospital, with a lot of good doctors who have specialties. So I've ran into some people who they tell me their story, or even you just overhear it, and it just makes this whole process has made me more sensitive to some things that people go through, including myself, because I was kind of a tough it out kind of guy, before.
So let's go back to that 4-year period before they started doing the things to help. And let's talk about the mental aspect of it. What was going through your mind? Because you are a person of faith. And I'm sure with anybody, it's probably going to be why? What is this, God? And why are you doing this to me? Especially having to go into the hospital every 3 to 5 months. What was going through your mind and your faith during that time?
Yeah. During the actual hospital stays, mostly what's going through my mind is fatigue, thoughts of fatigue and stress and just being tired. And when is this going to be over? And I don't want to say feeling sorry for myself, but definitely wishing this could just be done. There's a lot of mental fatigue that comes with that, because at this time, my wife and I had only been married the first time I got sick, it had only been 6 months. So, I mean, if we go back to, the 4 or 5 year mark where I actually got some help, again, we're only married 4 or 5 years. And that's really tough. That's really tough on your marriage, because it takes effect on us relationally, right? Because I'm not even just there to support her and everyday life and how was your day and that sort of thing. Financially, because I'm not making money. I'm not at work, sure. My job is protected, but I'm not making money, not getting paid for this time off. There's just a lot of things that it affects. So that stuff would go through my mind. And it was really hard to process all that stuff, just because I had never dealt with anything this serious in my life.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to, get from where I was of that tiredness to a point of, okay, everything's going to be okay. Eventually we're going to get through this type of thing. Because at this point we're going through 4 or 5 years, 3 or 4, every 4 to 5 months or whatever, I'm in the hospital. Like, that's a lot of times,
Yeah.
At this point in my life,
Yeah.
I've been hospitalized, and I'm talking about admissions, not just, I went to the ER and they said, well, you're technically okay, go back home. So just admissions,
Yeah.
I mean, 25 times in my life, and
Yeah,
that's
and
way
you're
more
staying,
than anybody needs to be.
and you're staying there. What's an average stay, at least in that time, in that 4-year time?
Yeah,
what
at
was
that
your
time,
average
it was
stay?
about a week.
It was about a week. A week every time, not knowing when it's going to happen, because it would happen right out of the blue. Even after I've met you and talking to you, like, I'd go see you at the bank because that's where you worked and say, hey, how you doing? And then a little while later, I hear you're in the hospital, or the next day.
Right.
Like, dude was just running a mile around the bank. What happened? Maybe it's me. It's not him. It's me. I'm doing no. Yeah, that can be strenuous. And then was there ever a time where you kind of lost hope, where you kind of gave up? Or did you have enough community and people around you that kept you going?
Yeah, that's a great question, because truthfully, I won't say that I ever lost hope in my faith, right? I never lost hope, but I definitely lost direction, in the sense of I don't know where to go from here. Like, it used to be things that were troublesome in my life, or, whatever problem I had, I can see a solution. I can see a way out. I knew it was temporary, things like that, right?
Yeah.
But this particular thing, after, several years, I'm like, okay, so what do I do from here? I'm tired. I don't know where to go. Like, I need some support. And to answer your question, yeah, I did have a lot of good friends who were there. I mean, you showed up several times. I think of this random time I was in the hospital, and you showed up and you made me watch Wipeout. And you loved Wipeout. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, I don't really care for this show too much. Like, I'm glad Tony's here, but I think my wife was there at the time. I was like, I'm glad my wife is here, but I really don't want to watch Wipeout right now. But the point was, you were there.
That's what I do. Once I found out, I remember. Well, I didn't live very far from the hospital. I was like 3-4 blocks away at that time, and so I was like, okay, this is easy. I can do this, because I am human. I don't know if you know that, and so I am very selfish in nature sometimes. But when I found out, you're in pain, it's like, oh, dude, I got to go do something. So I packed up the Blu-rays or DVDs or whatever it was, because there wasn't a whole lot of digital streaming back then. I'm like, all right, let's go. And I tried not to make you laugh, because I knew you were in pain. And when I looked at you, dude, you looked so tired and out of it. I'm like, oh gosh, I can't make him laugh. But that's kind of our thing. Like, we make each other laugh.
Right.
And so I felt so bad, but I tried to do the best that I could, not knowing really what's going on and the extent of it. But how did your family and your wife respond to it, or take it? I mean, even though they're not going through it, they see a person that they love and they care about going through it, and in a lot of pain, and they're thinking all the things too. How would you say they responded to it?
That's one thing that's really, in this process, I've learned to sympathize and empathize with other people, because that wasn't me before. So when I say that, what I mean is, I've tried to learn from their perspective, or see things through their eyes as to what was happening. So let me give you one example. One time when I was in the hospital, they ended up putting me in the ICU. So they gave me so many pain meds that my heart rate was really low, right? And they were just wanting to keep an eye on me. So I was in the ICU, and I was basically asleep the whole time, right? Like, I'd wake up, I don't know, what felt like every, 3 or 4 hours, and I'd only be awake for a few minutes, maybe half an hour, go right back to bed. Well, this one time, my family's there. My parents, obviously, my wife, some of my aunts and uncles, and I wake up and everyone's just kind of huddled a bit around the bed around me, right? And I wake up
That's
and
not
they're
a
just like
good
bawling.
that's not a good
Yeah,
visual.
exactly, exactly. They are bawling, right? And all I can think of is like I wake up and I'm like, am I dying? Like, why are they all crying like this?
Is this my last rites? What? I didn't even have the final
Exactly.
meal yet.
So I turned to, who was it? Was it my dad? Or I think it was my dad I turned to. I think he was just off to my left. And I turned to my dad and I asked him, and I look at him like as serious as I can, and I ask him, I was like, am I dying? And he tells me, he says, no, everyone's just really sad. Like at that point, I think I'd been there a couple days already. They're like, nobody likes to see you like this. And I turned to my wife, who's kind of standing at the foot of the bed, and I see her go and hug my aunt, and they're crying and they're bawling. My point is, I was scared for myself, right?
Yeah.
I woke up and I'm like, what's going on? But then when I see everything that they're going through, right?
Yeah.
When I see how they're reacting, how much this affects them, to myself, I thought, guys, I'm all right. I'm just in bed for a while. I'm in pain. Like, oh, I'll be good. But I understood how much it hurt them to see me there. And I had so many good people in my life who were like that. When I hurt, they hurt. When I'm doing well, they enjoy those successes with me. So I had a ton of people there supporting me, like we mentioned earlier. And it's one of those things I've learned. This process has taught me a lot about seeing things through other people's eyes from an emotional standpoint, from a lack of standpoint. One other quick example here. So when they put me in the hospital, the whole reason is I can't eat or drink water, or food or water, right? So I'm what they call NPO. So I have to have IVs to make sure I get, vitamins and all that sort of good stuff. So the second time that we mentioned where I really got sick, I was out of work for 3 or 4 months. I think it was like 3 months. I went home. I still couldn't eat or drink anything. I took an IV pump home. And so after a month being home, they told me, okay, you can go ahead and you can try drinking water now. We're going to reintroduce, drinks and food slowly. And I'll never forget that first time I drank the water after a month of not eating. Maybe it was just the chlorine in the Fresno water or the fluoride or whatever it is.
I was just going to say that, but it's like, no, I'll wait till the story's done, then I'll make my joke.
Right.
Thank you for going for that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, but it was sweet. Like it was sweet and I teared up and I thought to myself, like, I take advantage of things like this, right? Just the ability to go to your faucet and pour water, or even now, like now I just, bottled water with you wherever you go. Like you just have it, you don't think about it. I take advantage of those things. I don't even give it a second thought. But at that very moment, I thought to myself, I'm never going to forget this moment because how many people, not only, our mind typically goes to the worst, like third world countries or whatever, but even here in Fresno, like so many homeless people out on the streets in the summer, like, do they even have a place just to get water, But this process has taught me that, and it's, I'm still going through it. I'm still learning that process, because that's a tough thing for me to really just slow down. I'm very, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say almost dogmatic about things, like this is how I do things. This is like, if you do this and this and this, you'll end up here. A lot of emotion is taken out of things for me. So this has definitely taught me to slow down, experience that emotion, because it's going to help you help others.
Yeah.
But it's quite the process.
So now that it's been some time and that you've been going through this, how have your thoughts changed from then and now? How have you grown when you have to go sit inside a hospital? Because it still happens. Like this past year, it hasn't happened a lot.
Right.
But it does happen. How have your thoughts changed on faith and just life in general?
Yeah. I think the first thing is that now I'm appreciative that I know some of the signs. Before, like I said, I was kind of a tough it out kind of guy. Wait, no, I'll be okay. And then by the time I go to the hospital, I'm I'm deep into the pain,
Yeah.
Now I know some of the signs, it's, okay, let's stop this now. Let's go now. There's a lot more calm. There's a lot more understanding, medically about what's going on and how to stop that. There is a lot more with my faith. There's a lot more reliance on the fact that everything I go through, every trouble that I go through is going to produce endurance and its good works in me. That verse that I referenced earlier, that's really what that verse is about. It's talking about, it says something like, letting troubles and trials of all kinds do its good work in you. Be patient, because it's perfecting your faith, and that's what I've taken into account. And I have to go back and say, you had asked the question about the people in my life, my family and my wife and things like that. How have they reacted? They've been there for me. They've encouraged me. And that verse specifically, I was pointed to that by Adam. Obviously, Adam. I called him because, and this is answering that same question, how have my thoughts changed, right? Previously, when I picked up the phone and called Adam that day, that night, actually, I remember it, I was tired. Like, I was done. In fact, what I told him was, if God is intending to teach me something through this, or even somebody else, like, I think I've learned it. Like, let's move on. Let's move forward. Like, whatever that lesson is, and if it's someone else, like, okay, make them more visible in my life so I can show them what I'm going through here, But he pointed me to that verse because my point was, I'm done. I'm ready for this to be done. Let's move on.
Yeah.
But the verse was the exact opposite. Like, hold on, slow down. Like, you need to learn something through this. So obviously my faith has changed or my view has changed in that I understand God takes all these difficult situations and he can teach us something, and it's perfecting our faith. Like I said, I'm definitely a lot more sympathetic to others and what they go through. I definitely understand that everything I go through is not about me, because so many people have come up to me during this time frame and told me, like, I see what you go through. I know what you go through. If you can do this, then I can go through that type of thing. And that's encouraging to me. That's very encouraging,
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So just to give a little bit more context on who you are and what you're doing today, you have a wife and now you have a daughter who is 7?
Yes, 7. She'll be 8.
Yes.
Are we in June yet? Technically, no, we're still May. So she'll be 8 next month.
Okay. Does that change your perspective some now that you have a daughter?
I think it changes my efforts for sure. Prior to her being born, there was a lot of selfishness involved in terms of like what I needed to change, like my eating habits. I was like, yeah, I've done this so far. I'll be all right. That's good enough. I think is probably the best way to describe it. I've changed enough. But once my daughter came along and she started noticing and understanding that I was gone for, 4, 5, 6 days at the hospital, and I come back and I can't do much, that I think that made it a little easier or gave me more motivation. Just because that sucks when when you see your daughter crying, and I think we used to kind of talk in code, like around my daughter when I was leaving. I was telling my wife, okay, like, I'll be back, like, not telling her exactly where I was going. My wife, of course, knew where I was going, but not saying, hey, I'm going to the hospital, because we didn't want that to be a thing. But my daughter, like all kids, they'll pick up on it eventually,
Yeah.
And so the first time I left and she picked up on it, it kind of broke my heart, because she knew I was going to be gone for a while, and that was all the motivation, that I needed to continue this process, to keep going. So having a daughter, absolutely, man, because it's not just that I don't want her to be sad. It's that I understand that I need to be there for her, My wife can only do so much for my daughter. I can only do so much for my daughter. She needs both of us.
Yeah.
So that definitely changed. My wife, being married. So I was married the first time I got sick. We had just been married. And I think I've told this story before, but my wife has always been my biggest fan. And when you first start out in a relationship, that's very much like go team go, right? Like, you're awesome, you can do this. But over time, you start seeing, I don't want to say the flaws as if we're, like I'm a terrible person, but she starts seeing where I can make improvements. And that turns from go team go to, I expect you to do this. You can do better. Like, I expect more of you. And that works both ways.
Right.
But it turned into that. And I think having that honesty of, look, I know you've done this, but you've got to do more, has also changed over time. In the sense of, there's still the rooting for me and the cheering me on, but we also got to be honest with each other. And she's done that for me as well. I'm like, okay, but don't forget this. Don't get complacent, type of thing. So having both of them in my life obviously has changed a lot.
And so you're still going through this. Is there any improvement on the medical side and from doctors saying, okay, if we might be able to do this procedure and that's going to help you not be here as often? Has there been any of that now?
There's no, what's the word I'm looking for? There's no new medical procedure that's going to help this. However, my condition has improved. Okay. Over time, with the better eating habits, I'm going to the hospital less often. In fact, the last time I was there was in April, just last month. And I was only there, I actually didn't even get admitted. I was just there for a couple hours in the ER. They gave me some pain meds, said, hey, your numbers are okay, you're on your way, type of thing. Yeah. And prior to that, it was May of 2020. So we had gone almost a year of no hospitalization, no pain, no nothing. So there has definitely been marked improvement. I mean, I'll go through stretches where I'll have like 7, 8, 9 months, of nothing, as opposed to that beginning where it was 3 or 4 months. And then the intensity of the hospitalizations or the pain is less as well. So there's definitely improvement. Procedures have definitely helped. My own behaviors of eating habits have helped. But the short answer of, is there a fix? I mean, short of a physical miracle from God, no, there's not like a medical surgery where they're going to say, okay, we're going to do this and you're all better now.
How do you process that through your mind, knowing that this is, it can pop up at any time now for the rest of your life, as of right now. And you could be there a couple of hours to a number of days and weeks. How do you process that, knowing that this could be the rest of your life with faith?
I think I have my moments. I have my moments where I understand that this is just the burden that I have to bear. This is just what my life is going to be. For whatever reason, God has decided like I can go through this type of thing. And my faith is really strong, where I'm like, okay, this is just what I got to do in life. There's not another choice. But then I have other times where I'm frustrated. I guess the two sides of the coin when you have this type of experience is that sometimes you know how to deal with it, and other times it leads back to fatigue, where you're just like, man, like again, like we're going through this again. Because it's wearing. It's definitely wearing. So I don't want to paint the picture that somehow in this process, even though my faith has grown, that somehow it's linear. Like I started at point A, and if we're trying to get to Z, I'm close to Z already, because that's not the truth. There's times like I go back and forth, it's definitely a struggle.
Yeah. Are you good at reaching out when you're going through these things, or do you just bottle it up, or, just talk to your wife, talk to Rose, and then that's kind of where it ends? Or are you good at reaching out?
I think in the moment I'm actually pretty terrible at reaching out. While I'm hospitalized, or the week or so that I'm out of the hospital back at home, those are the moments I'm actually pretty terrible at it. And most of it has to do with energy level. I just want to sleep. I just want to rest. Like I don't have the energy to talk to anybody. It's after the fact that I'm okay talking about the situation. Yeah, guys, I was in the hospital again last month or last whatever. And I don't mind sharing the story. I don't mind sharing how I've struggled. while I'm going through it, my wife has really been the one who's been there for me. I almost view it like when you have a sibling, only your siblings can understand what you went through being raised by your parents, right? All the good and bad that comes with that, only they can identify with that. I think it's the same thing with Rose. I feel like only she can identify with me, you know, like what we're going through. Because there's times it hits me out of nowhere, to be honest with you. I remember one time I was driving home from work, and I think it was a long week at work. And I got home, and like on the drive home, I'm driving in my truck, and I'm just bawling, right? Like, I don't know what song I'm listening to, but some song triggered some emotion in me. And I'm bawling because I'm tired, right? Like, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. Like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. And I get home and like got tears running down my eyes, and my wife right away, you know, what's wrong. But she immediately understands, is my point, you know, and she's in that moment, and she's in that place with me, you know? So in the moment, I think I have my little group of people who are there for me, including my family, and up until last year, my dad, which we'll get to in a moment. But outside of that, once it's passed, it's much easier for me to talk about and to share my experiences.
Cool. All right, man. Well, thank you for sharing that and for being so open and honest with that. Let's move on to your dad.
Yeah.
Let's talk about him. I don't want to spend, you know, I want to spend a lot of time on the lessons that you've learned, because that's one of the things that I think would be great to keep his memory alive and stuff. I've got to meet your dad a few times, a lot of times. Did some ministry with him. I absolutely loved him. He had a huge impact on my life, on the way that he lived. So completely grateful for that. What happened, if you don't mind sharing? Like, it did come out of nowhere.
Yeah, it happened really quickly. It all happened over the course of a weekend. That I knew of, a Saturday was when he was feeling sick initially. Thought he had the flu or a cold or something. Then Monday, he passed away on that same weekend, that Monday, that evening at about 9:30. So things escalated really quickly. I didn't even know he was sick until Monday morning. So I hadn't like called or visited my parents that weekend. Monday morning, my mom or my brother, I think it was my brother, called me at work and said, "Hey, we're taking your dad to the hospital. He was sick all weekend. We thought he had a cold or a flu, but we're just taking him in to, you know, see if everything's okay." And I guess at that point, Monday morning, he was when he really started showing more signs, right? Like vomiting and things like that. He knew something was wrong. So he goes to the hospital. I get there. I leave work. I got there, I don't know, maybe 2:30 in the afternoon. And he's still waiting to be seen. Hadn't actually been seen by a doctor yet. I stay there for a couple hours. I leave. I say, "Hey, I'm going to come back. I got to go make sure, you know, everything's good at home with my daughter. Help my wife get, you know, my daughter ready for bed and bathed and whatever, all that sort of good stuff." Come back in the evening about 5:30, and that's when, at this point, he's seen a doctor, and they said he had an infection or a growth on his liver, and it had turned into an infection that got into his blood, which is, I guess that's technically called sepsis, like an infection in your blood. And they were preparing him for surgery. They were going to do surgery on him. They're like, it spread up into his chest and all this sort of good stuff. And that's when we knew things were pretty serious at that point. My brother had told me, "Hey, I want to let you know, I had to ask the doctor, you know, what are his chances for survival, you know, coming out of this?" And, you know, the doctor gave him a bunch of information, but basically said there's a 70% chance of survival, which is not really good when it comes to procedures, right? So we knew that there was at least a chance, you know, that things weren't going to turn out the way we wanted them to, but they needed to wait for surgery for his vital signs to be some kind of normal or stable. I guess some of his, I don't know if it was his blood pressure or his heart rate, it was too high. They needed it to come down. So he actually never made it that far, never made it to the operating room. While they were waiting, at this point, he was sedated. So I had, that then was the last time I talked to my dad before before I left to go check on my daughter, that was the last time I talked to my dad when he was still awake. So he's sedated at this point. They tell us they're moving him to ICU. And I mean, just a whole long story of, as they're moving him to ICU, they tell us which room he's going to be in. We're going down to ICU and we hear them call over the loudspeaker. There's a code blue in his room. And then we have like what seems like eternity of nobody telling us anything, but it was probably really about 5-10 minutes. Nobody really telling us anything. And then they tell us, well, when they transported him, physically from one bed to another, his heart stops. And then that just began the whole process. And eventually he just never made it through, So, I mean, to kind of recap all of that, Saturday he's feeling sick. Monday night, he's passed away at 9:30, So that, I mean, it happened fast. It happened really fast.
How has the last year been?
Wow. How do you sum that up?
Walk us through some of that, because I think, when people go through trauma like this, we feel like we're all alone and we don't feel like, I don't know. We just feel like we're alone, and we need to know that, man, other people have gone through the same thing, inside these same feelings, which in a weird way kind of encourages us. And so how has this last year been in going through this and with your faith? Because faith is still, it's a huge thing. Right. It was a huge thing for your dad. That's why I love the guy so much, is because he showed it. He showed it on his sleeve to me and to others that I brought to him. So yeah, just walk us through the last year real quick.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, I guess I'll give some context. He was a pastor and a minister for a really long time, most of my life. Mm-hmm. And he definitely lived that out in terms of serving others, often neglected himself for the benefit of others, wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, and do the dirty work. But to answer your question, though, what has the last year been like? It actually started off really well. I didn't feel alone at all. And I would imagine most people go through this when someone first passes, when your family member or loved one first passes. Friends and family are there. They're there for you. They're supportive. And I mean, my brother's local church did a great job of supplying meals for my mom and my brother. And just like, they didn't worry about a meal for, I feel, at least a solid month,
Yeah.
And there were so many people showing up, making phone calls, sending you a text, just making sure they can be there for you.
Yeah.
And as expected, I don't want to make it seem like I'm blaming them. That fades out eventually.
Right.
Because eventually they have their everyday lives that they have to get back to. Mm-hmm. So in the very beginning, everybody's there, and even for myself, my dad was a planner. So my dad worked in a funeral home. Mm-hmm. And he actually had his funeral arrangements ready to go. But even with all of that done, there were still some logistical things that we had to do. So there was a lot of busy time, is my point. At this point, I didn't feel alone or by myself or have to sit in the silence,
Yeah.
So I was busy. But over time, it kind of gradually fades out.
Yeah.
A little less people there, a little less texts, a little less phone calls. And then you really have to kind of sit in it. You really have to just kind of sit in that silence. And I think the hardest part for me was the finality of it all. Going through this, I had never experienced anxiety or panic attacks before. Mm-hmm. But since then, it happens. I don't want to say regularly, because I've gotten better. I've seen a therapist and that sort of thing, and I've definitely been able to deal with it better. But right after all the busyness and the texts and the phone calls go away, that's when the anxiety and the panic kicked in for me. Just dealing with the finality. Like, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this. Like I said, I have a very step-by-step approach of how I'm going to deal with things, and I didn't know how to deal with this. Let me give you one example. Obviously, you miss everything about your dad when he's gone. Right. So just as a little tribute to my dad, when the football season started, my dad was a Raider fan. I asked my brother if I could borrow his football jersey that he had. And just, I wore it during the game while I watched the game. It's just my way of, acknowledging that, games that I used to watch with my dad, I couldn't do, but I'm still going to honor him in some little way, right? But when I wore the jersey, it still smelled like him. Like it still had like his cologne, like his Old Spice or whatever he wore that old guys wear. And I thought to myself, man, like, what do I do? If I wear this too often, it's not going to smell like him anymore. Yeah. If I wash it, it's not going to smell like him anymore. If just over time, it's going to fade. And I began to panic. Like, what do I do to preserve this? What do I do to make sure this doesn't go away, that I can hold on to it as long as possible? And that panic and anxiety just really began to get a hold of me. And my point is, you never know what's going to lead to that, because it happens randomly now,
Yeah.
So anyway, my point is, I've had to sit in this loneliness sometimes, the hurt, the finality of there's nothing you can do, that's it, that's the end. When my dad was passing at this point, so before he passed, he had coded. On the third time, we told them stop. On the second time, so between time 2 and time 3 of him, code blue, he's laying in the bed, he's there. We don't know if he can hear us or not. And my brother, myself, my sister, my mom, we sense that he's going, right? So we all start saying our goodbyes to him. And I just remember I didn't want to mess up the situation by saying too much. As if somehow I was going to reconcile every bad thing that happened between my dad and I. And we had a great relationship, but just, they're your parents. There's times where you have regrets and, I wish I would have done that better. I didn't want to attempt to reconcile everything in this short period of time. So all I told my dad, and I'll never forget, all I told him was, I love you. Thank you for everything, as I had my hand on his chest. And I thought to myself, I don't know if he's going to hear any of this. I don't know if this is for me more than it is for him. But as I look back on that, I think to myself, those were the very last words I ever said to him. And I can never say anything again, right? There's that finality. I wish I would have said more, And that's been the toughest part of all of this. I wish there was more. And I'd imagine I'm not the only one who feels that way, that there's a lot of people who feel that way. But to get to the second part of the question you asked me, how has my faith played into all of this? My dad taught us well, instructed us to read our Bible and to live it out. And I know that although he's not here with us physically, his eternal existence, his spirit is in a better place. There's hope, and not the kind of hope where you cross your fingers and you're like, oh God, I hope this all works out, but the kind of hope that what is to come. So even in those struggles, even though I have to sit in the finality of like, that's it, it's done, like this hurts, this is terrible, this sucks, I still have hope of what's to come for myself as well, right? And I think that's where the faith part carries you through. I think growing up, when I went to funerals as a kid, like members of our church, there was always that preacher who was reading the verse, quoting, like, death, where is your sting? Death, where is your victory? And I'm thinking to myself, what, are you kidding me? Like, this sucks. Like, it feels like death has won just a little bit, right? But then I as I read my Bible and I learn throughout life, that's not the death we're talking about, right? We're talking about the death that happened, that separated the relationship between mankind and God. That separation, that death doesn't exist anymore, right? Because Jesus came, He did the work. He reconciled us again. And that's where my faith comes in, right? So does this temporary death suck? Yeah, of course it does. But that's not the death we're talking about, right? We're talking about something else. There's no longer separation. And my faith has been, to be honest with you, but my wife and I have talked about this. I don't know how people who don't have God get through it. I don't know where your hope is. I don't know where your faith is.
All right, let's compose ourselves a little. Let's let the audience compose ourselves before we continue on with, because I do want to talk now about, the lessons and celebrate the things that your dad has taught you. And he definitely has taught me a thing or two. So even though he's died, he's left such an impression on so many people. I mentioned it in my first episode with Tina, the impression that he left on me. Why don't you go first? Because,
I feel like the life lessons are still coming, to be honest with you. Just as I look back and I start doing things and I see myself turning into my dad as time goes on. I think one of the major lessons that he taught was a life of serving. He often put others before him, before himself. And in a way, there's times where I think that was almost to his own detriment, where I think, why would you do this? Why would you do that type of thing? And then as I got older, and he continued to do those things, I saw that it's not because he was putting himself down. It's not because he was saying, well, you can have whatever. Just as an example, you can have this extra $20 in my wallet because you need it more than I do, or because I can go without. It's not because he was denying himself. It's because he was pointing people to someone else. In all the work that my dad did, I don't think I ever saw be like me. See how I'm doing it? Copy me. I'm reminded of the verse that Paul says, to imitate me as I imitate Christ. I think that's what my dad was doing. He's not saying, look at me. He's saying, look at Christ. Like, this is the way we do it. Like, why am I so different? It's not me. Like, I'm trying to point you to something else. And it always, the funny thing is, it always started off, I don't want to say always, most of the time it started off as a very unspiritual work, if you will. It wasn't a Bible study. It wasn't a prayer. It wasn't a church potluck or picnic. It always started off in just living life. Well, what do you need help with? And my dad was kind of a jack of all trades, right? So oftentimes it started off with, okay, I'll go over and I'll paint your house. I can do this for you. I can do that for you. And that's how it was for my dad and I. As I got older, I often invited him over to help me with projects around my home, things that I could have figured out, things that I could have hired for somebody, but I just wanted to spend the time with him. And that fellowship that I had with my dad while we're installing a screen door, while we're installing a fan, while we're painting the house, while we're whatever, right? That's just life. Those are just things you need to do. There's nothing spiritual about installing a ceiling fan. But it's spending that time with him where you start having conversations just about anything. And it eventually leads to my dad saying, don't look at me, look at Christ. That's, I'm not showing you me. That's the point. It's not about me.
So he definitely,
lesson.
He definitely did that. I mean, he opened up your mom and your dad both opened up their doors to make some tamales for me while I was fundraising. I didn't really know your dad, I don't remember if I even met him before, but maybe I did. Yeah, I did. I met him a few times, but why would you open, Sister Jenny is like, yeah, we're going to go make tamales at Willie's house. And I'm like, okay. And it's like, why? I don't know if I showed how grateful and how much that meant to me, which I probably didn't because, at that time I was like, oh, okay, I don't know how to respond to this, but it definitely meant a lot. And I loved
going to his church. His church was in Chinatown, which is and it's right next to this area where there's a lot of homeless encampment, even in Chinatown too. But the Paparella house is out there and everything. And I loved going out there and just seeing his heart. And he was just so happy. And I loved teaming up with him and putting people in front of him because he would make them feel special and welcomed and loved. And that's what he did to me, you know? So every time that I see him, he always had a huge smile and always made me laugh and how you doing and what's going on? I just wanted to hear how I was doing. And so I've tried to do that in my own personal life. But I absolutely love teaming up with him and taking people down there. And we did a number of events and just trying to serve. I remember one time I had like 40 college students come out and he was so happy. And we gave out those little hygiene bags, did a barbecue and clothes.
I remember that.
That was probably like the second or third time. And I think he had the same attitude as me. Like the first time we did hot dogs and it was like, okay, people can come and grab a hot dog. And I'm one of I don't want to just say, okay, you can get one hot dog, one water, one chip. Like, how much do you want? What do you need?
Right.
Okay, you want 4? Here you go. You don't need to make up no excuse. Oh, I got my sister or whatever. My friend is at the watching our stuff. Like, I don't care. Like, you want 12 hot dogs? I'll give you 12 hot dogs. You want this whole case of water? Cool. And I definitely learned that from him. And I will always remember that and try and live to that standard because he set the bar high in loving people.
He definitely had a servant's heart. The story I'm about to tell you, I've never told anyone before, and only my family and my wife know this because they've been there and experienced it. But he had a servant's heart, and let me kind of explain what I mean. One of the times I was in the hospital, it was actually not too long before he passed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the hospital. I've been there like maybe 3 or 4 days, and it's really hard just to do the smallest things there. When I'm in there, and my dad is there, and I tell him, "Hey, can you help me stand up? I need to go use the restroom." And so he says, "Yeah, of course, no problem." So he does the normal things. He helps me, take the blankets off, uncover, helps me stand up, and I mean, I don't want to give TMI, but I think it's important for the story here. I can't physically walk to the restroom.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to urinate into this like big plastic jug, like urinal thing. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm having the hardest time just even standing up. Right. Mm-hmm. And my dad, who just has the biggest servant's heart, instead of like, cause he's my dad, we're both adult grown men and it could be awkward, but my dad just, I didn't even have to ask him. He helps me stand up. He's bracing me. He's holding the urinal so I can just function,
Yeah.
And he just says, "Don't worry about it. Take your time." Cause I told him, I said, "I'm sorry. I'll go as fast as I can." And he's like, "Don't worry about it. Just take your time." And that's a really hard thing to understand, to serve someone to that level where something that could have been totally embarrassing for me, because it's like I need privacy type of thing, he just makes you feel comfortable. He's like, "Don't worry, just I'm here for you. Like physically, I'm here to support you right now." And that's hard. That's really hard to comprehend, someone who has that much commitment to serving others. And that's just who my dad was. That's just who he was.
Yeah. Definitely. Do you have any more stories that you want to tell? Do you have another lesson? I lost track because there's just so much to learn from him. And I lost track on where we were.
My dad also I'll throw out one more story. My dad also understood balance. Sometimes you're loving and you're there for each other, but sometimes you got to show some tough love. This story goes back to when I was a kid. I was in elementary school. And it's maybe not the way I would have shown tough love, but this is how my dad did it, and it worked, I think. So I was in elementary school. I was in 5th grade. I played football on the elementary school team. I wasn't very good, right? And I was just this little short, chubby kid who, whatever. So I remember I'm playing one day and I'm on the defense, and whatever, I'm out there doing the best I can to tackle guys and whatever. And it's hot. Football happens in the summer and it's hot. And I tell my dad, who was out there helping coach, I turned to him and I tell him, I said, I need a break. I'm tired. And that was a mistake, apparently. Because he tells me, he says, "You're tired?" I said, "Yeah, I'm tired. I'm hot." He goes, "You're tired?" I said, "Yeah." So he puts me at a different position where it's more physically involved. He says, "You're not getting a break right now." He says, "You'll get a break when I tell you you're ready to have a break." So he puts me at a tougher position, and it's hard. And I'm on the verge of crying, right? Like I'm just a little 5-year-old kid, right? Like I'm tired. I'm on the verge of crying. But after practice, he tells me, he says, "I know your limits. I know what you can do." He says, "So I'm not ever going to put you in trouble. I'm never going to do anything that's going to hurt you, that I think is going to hurt you." He says, "But sometimes I'm going to push you. I'm going to push you because you're going to be comfortable, or you think this is it. That's all you can do. So sometimes I'm going to push you to do more, and it's going to hurt. Yeah. You're going to cry. You're going to be tired. You're going to hate me for it. But in the end, you're going to realize how much toughness and how much strength you have inside of you." And so that was one thing that was my dad kind of at the earlier age. He got softer as he got older, but that was something that kind of stuck with me. That sometimes when you think you're at your limit, when you think you're done, there's nothing left to give. You've got more than you think, you know? And that's definitely something that stuck with me as well. But he taught me all kinds of lessons. Those were the two I'd probably pick off top, how to be tough, how to get more from yourself, but also living a life of serving, man. That's really what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for sharing those stories. I thank you for your friendship and for being such a great dude that laughs at all my jokes, even if they're not even funny.
Right.
It's been a ride, just to see on how you've gone through everything and how you've endured. That is definitely one of the things that I have learned from you with the endurance, not just with your health issues, but your father and going through all of that. And I know that there are struggles behind the scenes, but every time that I'm in front of you, you just I can see that endurance and that strength that still just keeps going. So that is completely encouraging to me, and that's something to learn and to learn from. So thank you so much.
Thank you for allowing me to come and tell my story, to be a part of what you're doing. This whole endurance thing, for me, is just a part of carving out my own legacy in life, while at the same time continuing the legacy of those who came before me. And that's a whole other story that part of that story of who my family is. I know you know my family very well.
Oh yeah.
But I appreciate not just being able to say, yeah, I'm part of them, but also doing my own thing and share my own story, and hope that people find encouragement in that.
Yes.
That, specifically with health issues, and it sucks sometimes, but there's still a lot of life to live.
Yeah. And that's the whole purpose of Submerge Life, is just to encourage people just to get out there and just live it. We're going to go through some junk. We're going to go through some terrible, horrible, traumatic experiences. But you've got a decision. You can let that hold you down, or you can let it push you forward. Everybody that's watching, if you're watching on IGTV, if you're watching on YouTube, or listening to this on Spotify or whatever, if this story encourages you and somebody that's going through something that's similar, share it, push it out there, because that's the whole purpose, is to remind people, one, that we're not alone, and that we can go through this together, distantly, or find that community and be open and honest and be like, hey, this is what I'm going through. And hopefully you've got people there to help pick you up, whether it's family or friends, or even people in social media. There's a number of people that I've met through social media and through all these things that I will still message every now and then. and they'll message me. So it's been a great journey, a great thing to see. So thank you so much, Pez.
Yeah, of course.
For sharing, and I hope we can do it again at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
So,
and again, thank you for doing all this and letting me be a part of it, man.
All right. And I just want to say also thank you to your mom. She was there with everything and helping. I'm not sure, sometimes we get caught up in talking about your dad, and it's like, I don't want to forget about your mother. Your mother was so wonderful during that time, whether it was tamales or at the church, and both of them just beautiful. Definitely encouraged me,
awesome,
and I loved going back and just serving them and serving with them.
Yeah,
they always made me feel special. It made me feel a part of the family and a part of the team, and that. So, anyhow, thank you so much. I will talk to you soon, man. All righty.
All right, you take it easy.
Bye bye. You too, man. Bye bye.
Bye bye.